Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to get started for our second breakout session. So I'm Lindsay Griffin Boylan from the Greater Wyoming Valley Chamber of Commerce, and hopefully you guys are having a great day so far at Empower. Just a couple housekeeping items before I bring up our sponsor to introduce our next speaker. So just a reminder to please silence your cell phones when you're in the session today. We want you to definitely ask questions in the app, so hopefully everyone has that downloaded. We already have 2 questions, so we'll make sure we leave some time at the end. Just as a reminder, also, all the sessions today are being recorded, and exits are obviously right in the back area here with restrooms down our hallway there. So with that, I would like to bring up our sponsor for today, Verizon, Adriana Dawson, who is the Community Engagement Manager of the East Region, to give our opening remarks, and welcome our speaker.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. So I'm hoping to kick us off with the same kind of energy that we had in our general session room. I did this when I had the opportunity to introduce the speaker for our first session. So how about we bring a little bit... Come on, ladies, let me hear you. All right, thank you, Aretha. So again, my name is Adriana Dawson. I am thrilled to be with you this morning. I am the Director of Community Engagement for the East Region at Verizon, and I have the distinct pleasure of overseeing the Verizon Foundation from everything from Vermont all the way to Virginia. And so Verizon is thrilled to continue to make significant investments in our communities and in our small businesses, as well as our chambers. But without further ado, I was going to introduce you to the sneakers too, because this conference needed, more bling. So how about, a little showcase for the sneakers? Thank you. Telling you, between Aretha and bling, you can't go wrong. So without further ado, allow me to introduce you to our next breakout session speaker, Dr. Katie Desiderio, who is a tenured faculty member at Moravian University and a principal partner in learning of Proximal Development LLC, an authorized DIS partner specializing in leadership development and performance through learning. She chose a second career in higher education, where she celebrates the honor of being the first female chairperson of the Economics and Business Department at the 6th oldest institution in America, and the first to educate women. So as a scholar practitioner, she recently co-authored Wall Street Journal best-selling business book, The Beekeeper, Pollinating Your Organization for Transformative Growth. Dr. Desiderio is a proud alumna of Wilkes University, where she earned her bachelor's and master's degrees, and Barry University, where she earned her doctorate degree. And without further ado, leading us through being a beekeeper, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Dr. Katie Desiderio.
Thank you. Everyone, can we give a round of applause to Adriana for such a great opening and great energy? Yeah, and her great shoes, right? All of those things. And so probably many of you are wondering, right, becoming a beekeeper. What does that mean? What does that have to do with women? What does that have to do with leadership growth? And so there's a space here for all of us to start thinking about that word bee. We get to choose who and how we want to be every day. And so as I go through this time together today, I don't want to wait until the end of the session to wait for questions. Raise your hand as I'm going through, ask questions, share your curiosity, right? This is a time for us to be together. This is a time for us to embrace learning and growth together. But it's also a time for us to reclaim agency for how we want to author our story. Okay, and so when we think about becoming a beekeeper as leaders, every single day we get to choose, right, how we show up and how we make people feel after an interaction with us. Okay, and so it was mentioned in the opening that I recently co-authored the book, The Beekeeper, Pollinating Your Organization for Transformative Growth. I'm going to take you through the lessons, really, of the book. We wrote this in the space of learning, right, leadership lessons, specifically at the individual level. Okay, and so my co-author couldn't be here today. He lives in South Florida. But he and I met in our doctoral program, right, working in completely different industries, thousands of miles apart. But we had passion, a shared passion for this work of encouraging ongoing learning and growth. And we heard in the keynote this morning that we can't train passion, right? We have to know what our passion is, the things that move us, the things that on the days that we're not motivated, we have the discipline to get up and do because it's meaningful. And nobody else has to understand it, right? But if we know that it drives our inner purpose and it's something that doesn't really feel like work, and I'll say, I'm going to tell you a lot of stories about writing this book and the space of really moving myself out of my comfort zone to do this, right? Moving into a space of what I call beginner's mind. And so people say you're a subject matter expert, right? But every day I'm like, I have so much to learn. And so how do I show up in that space of curiosity to just learn and grow and ask questions? And so with my co-author, right, we show up in that space where we help each other in kind of encouraging, right, that space of curiosity. And so this slide is a little bit about me. But this slide is also something that I want to encourage everyone here. I do this in the graduate classes that I teach at Moravian University. I do this in my consulting space when I'm working on leadership development with individuals, is do you have a one slide? And so when you're thinking about introducing yourself, do you have a one slide that tells people just a little bit about you? Because a lot of times as women, especially, we make assumptions about what people know, or we create a narrative that doesn't really matter, right? I don't want to brag, or I don't want to put things up there that might seem like I'm talking about myself. But there's a space, right, for us as we're interacting with others, for them to know those deep level diversity attributes about us that influence how we lead, how we make decisions, right? And so from a deep level diversity perspective, actually, let me see by show of hands, how many people in here know the difference between surface level diversity and deep level diversity? Okay, great. What is deep level diversity for those that raise their hands? What's in one example? Okay. Yeah, life experience, education, maturity, our personality and behavioral attributes, our core values. Those are all our deep level diversity attributes. Those things influence how we lead. And so when we're thinking about creating inclusive environments in our workspace, we're knowing the things that are on my slide here about the people who are working on our teams. We're creating an environment where it feels safe for people to welcome diversity of thought and voice. And so from an inclusive leadership perspective, right, we're rounding out the circle to invite surface level diversity, but also for people to know about their deep level diversity attributes. And so we see some things on the slide, right, in my education, right, in my experience. It was said in the intro that I made a career change after 6.5 years in corporate marketing, right? It was actually one of my mentors at Wilkes University that called me back to teach a class. And I heard earlier this morning, and it was so inspiring, if someone sees something in you that you don't yet see in yourself, right? That's called the Pygmalion effect. Be open enough to say, okay, I'll try it. Maybe I won't love it. Maybe I won't be great, but they see something and I trust that person, so let me try. And when I did that, that propelled my future into higher education. It was the reason I went back and got my PhD. It was the reason I decided to sell my house and sell my car and quit my job at Rodale working on Men's Health and Women's Health magazines to go after this thing, right, that felt so passionate while I was in the classroom adjunct teaching. Okay, but those things factor, right, how I show up and how I lead. You'll also see things on the slide like my disc style Anyone in here familiar with DISC? Okay, so I'm a DISC facilitator. My consulting company is an authorized partner. I could have used a lot of different assessments, but DISC allows us to encourage behavior change. So when I look at my SI style with line shading in D, I know the things that move me. I know my mindsets, but I also know my stretch areas. One of my big stretch areas is like I over-focus on people, right? And so like I can't spend too much time on like, tell me about your weekend. I know you and your kids were doing this, right? Because I have colleagues, D and C style, who want to get right to business, that might want me to come with an agenda. And so we're going to learn a little bit about that too in our heightened awareness and how we choose to be, knowing that we can't get lost in what we want. Leadership is not about me. It's about me knowing me and then creating an environment where I'm encouraging the way forward for the people around me, right? And so I know when I need to use energy, right, to focus on those things that don't come natural to me. I also have on here my core values. By show of hands in the room, how many of you know your core values? Okay, I see a couple. For those of you that don't, reach out to me. I'll send you a worksheet to guide you through the exercise of identifying your core values. Your core values help you identify your passions. Your core values, right, help you understand when you have fuel or when you feel passionate about something, or when you have an emotional response to something, when that value is compromised. Instead of just, I'm mad, you understand why and you have the words to articulate it. And so one of those for me is, in communication, do what you say you will do. I simply use the acronym DWYSYWD. If you're not going to do it, you can't meet a deadline, it's really simple. Just say, life happened, I need to push the deadline, or can we work together? But the communication piece is key for me. I have an emotional response, right, if that core value is compromised, but I'm mindful that that core value of mine is not everybody else's core value. And so I have to communicate those expectations. And I'm able to effectively communicate it because I know myself. Okay? And so I want you to think about that, but also please reach out to me, right, if you want to discover your core values. I'll help you do that. All right, so by show of hands, how many of you feel what's on the right side, right? Our minds are full. Anyone feel that? Right? It's like hard not to check your email and your text messages and to think about what's happening back at the office and at home and how we're picking our kids up from school and who's orchestrating dinner and, right? I could go on and on and on. But we have to be mindful of those times when we have to mindfully shut off the noise, right? When we have to be present, when those things matter. And so I'm going to ask everyone right now to just close your eyes for 30 seconds. And I want you to turn off the noise in your minds. And I want you to think about one thing that you want to take away from this time investment that you're making today to be here. Okay, as you open your eyes, I want you to think about this opportunity to give yourself permission to every day, whether it's 30 seconds or I give myself 2 minutes every day, to turn off the noise. When I feel anxiety is rising, I give myself the gift to just close my eyes, right, and decide what I want to be present on, what I want to take away from the day, what I can tackle now versus what has to wait. And so it's easy for us, because we're emotional beings, right, to get lost in the space of feeling like our minds are full, right, and there's so much going on, and how could we accomplish it all? But we have the opportunity to activate the energy, again, in how we're authoring our stories, right, to think about what we want to give our time and energy to. And so this is something I want to say too. What we give our time and energy to grows. I want to say that again. What we give our time and energy to grows. I learned the most about this as a mom. I have a very close friend in the room with me right now, and she knows firsthand, I don't give my time and energy to kid drama. I just don't entertain it. I think kids could work out conflict. I think we could give them voice, right? I think that we could teach them how to be solutions focused, right? I talk a lot to my girls about de-escalating, right? She recently got a text message from a friend that said, I'm so mad at you. I can't believe you ignored me at practice. How she responds to that determines what happens next, right? And so the response that she gave to her friend was, I'm sorry if you felt like I ignored you. I'm not really sure what that means, but I'd like to talk to you about it in person when you come to my house tomorrow. I love you. Good night. Then she could de-escalate the weight because she didn't know what was happening, right? Instead of engaging, right, in things that continue to escalate. And so for all of us, think about what we want to give our time and energy to grow. The things we don't want to grow, we have to diffuse, right? And mindfully find ways to give our time and energy to things that we want to see more of. And so in this, right, in the lens check, when we look at that triad, we're going to go through this a little bit. Our IQ, right, what we learn, how we use those learnings. Our EQ, how we connect with others at the group and team level. And then our BQ, and the reason I chose DISC is because it encourages behavior change. And so for all of us, as we learn, and then we think about how we decide to be, how we make people feel after an interaction with us, right, encourages us to show up with certain behaviors. Okay, IQ, EQ, BQ. So we'll think about that a little bit as we go through this. Okay, so I put a riddle on the screen. Every time I facilitate a session, I start with a riddle because riddles encourage lateral thinking. And I recognize as I work with adults, right, we've been socially encouraged not to be curious, right? As we age, it's like, don't ask too many questions, right? Wait your turn, I'll get to you, right? But the space really is for all of us. How are we encouraging the opportunities to ask questions? And so often I realize that adults can't think of good questions to ask. And so when we do riddles, it's like, oh, I don't even know what question to ask. So the more we do it, we're priming ourselves to think about how we just ask questions. Okay, and so the way we play is, if you know the answer to this riddle, I don't want you to say the answer. Instead, I want you to ask me yes and no questions that give everyone in the room clues so that we're getting to the solution together. So if you think the answer to this riddle is the sun, you would ask me a question like, Katie, does it keep us warm on summer days? Is it in the sky? Would I draw it as a yellow circle at the top of a white piece of paper? Okay, and so that primes our brains to start to get to the solution together. So here's your riddle. You carry it everywhere you go. It never gets heavy yet. It carries weight. First question. Is it an emotion? No.
Do you have control over it?
No, you don't.
Is it inside or outside your body?
Well, let me go back to this question. So you don't initially, but maybe as life goes on. So I don't want to confuse you. Okay, what was your question?
Is it inside or outside your body?
It is outside. She said, is it inside or outside your body?
Is it reflective of a number?
Is it reflective of a number? No.
Is it an action?
Is it an action? No.
Is it a body part?
Is it a body part? No.
Is it tangible?
Is it tangible? No. Someone caught me on this question once because for children, sometimes they create a space where it is, but typically no.
Is it something you're born with?
You are not born with it, but you're getting warmer.
Is it a thought process?
Tell me again.
A thought process?
It's not a thought process.
Is it something you learn through education?
No. She said, is it something you learn through education?
Is it something you're given?
Yes. She said, is it something you're given? Now go back to where I said earlier, you're getting warmer.
Is it something your parent gives you?
Is it something your parent gives you or guardian? Yes. What is it? What am I?
Is it love?
It's not love. It's your name. Everyone, listen to this. The answer to the yeah, let's give a round of applause for. I love that. I love that. So listen. Your name. Your name is your brand. When people hear Katie Desiderio, right? They have immediate thoughts about me. But I get to choose, right, that story that I'm authoring in my interactions with people, in how I choose to be, right, in how I make people feel after an interaction with me. And so I don't take my name lightly, okay? I often have students who come to me and say, will you write me a letter of recommendation? And I say, come in and let's sit down and talk about all the people who know you, who can write a letter of recommendation for you, but I haven't been given the delight to get to know you. I'm not recommending people that I don't know, right? Because that's tied to my name. But when I know people, right, I'm elevating, I'm helping them rise. But there's a space for all of us, right, to understand all of the things that are associated with our name. And we have to really intentionally, right, take the pen to be able to author our story that's tied to our name. Okay? All right. So how many people in here are familiar with Carol Dweck's work in growth mindset? Awesome. So what's the difference between fixed and growth mindset? Does anyone want to share? Yeah.
I would say a fixed mindset is just, like there's one right way, or, it has to, something has to be, there's rigid structure. I think a growth mindset is that as you learn better, you do better, and you can change.
Good, right? Did everyone hear what she said about growth mindset? As you learn better, you do better. And so from a leadership perspective, the learning never ends, right? There's a concept in our book called be proximal. And I'm going to get to that in a little while, right? But when we're enacting this be mindset to be proximal, we're keeping ourselves and others at the center of learning and growth, okay? And so we have to think about, right, who you will be depends mainly on what mindset you choose. If you say, I can't, you won't. If you say, I can't do that right now, you're leaving yourself open to the space to learn and to grow and to surround yourself with people that help you rise. And so that's been a big piece for me, is recognizing the opportunity to surround myself with people that can help me be better. That's not weakness, right? That's the opportunity to help us rise together. And there's lots of people in the world, right, that do things better than me, that see things different than me, that come with a different lens than I do. And I can learn from them. I can learn with them, right? And there's reciprocity in the space of our opportunity to do that, okay? And so when I think about this book, right, this is kind of the visual image of what it means to be proximal, right? We're keeping learning at the center, at the core of our growth, okay? And so we're going to touch on this as we go through, right, really looking at what drove why the book is called The Beekeeper. And we can see, right, that second E in beekeeper is dotted, because by the end of the book, that second E falls off. In this fable, we learn from beekeepers and how beekeepers create a thriving hive. But from a leadership perspective, we can become beekeepers, right, in understanding how we create thriving hives, and understand it first starts with us. who and how we choose to be, but then creating an environment where we're allowing the people around us to do the same in authoring their story that might look a little different than ours. And thank goodness it does, right? Imagine a world where we were all authoring things in the same way, okay? And so when we think about this art of learning to be proximal, right, we're always embracing that growth mindset to say, how do I keep myself and others at the center, at the core of learning and growth? Okay, and so we'll give some examples of how to do that, and I'm going to really deconstruct the tri-level of leadership. And so in everything I do, right, I deconstruct the individual, the group and team level, and then the organizational level. And so something that's often misunderstood from a leadership perspective is that leadership starts at the individual level. You don't effectively lead unless you first know yourself. Let me say that again. You don't effectively lead unless you first know yourself. Leadership starts with you. And then it goes, right, to you working with and through others. But when you know yourself, when you understand, when you're having an emotional response to something, right, how you can articulate it, how you can better communicate, it encourages that space of enacting emotional intelligence, of the mindfulness of how you work with and through others. Okay? And so as we go through this, I'm going to take you through 4 core tenets from the book that help us to become beekeepers. And so the first is to identify your bee mindsets. And so for all of us at the individual level, I want you to start to think about, right, what your bee mindsets might be. And so before this book was even an imagination in my mind, I started an exercise in 2013 when my second daughter was born. And that exercise was for me to choose a bee mindset, a one-word kind of vision for myself to follow for the year, because I was feeling very busy and overwhelmed. I had 2 young children. It was at that time that they mentioned in my bio, I was the first female chair of the economics and business department, where I had over 500 students in the department, 26 faculty members, many of which were men who had been at the university for 20 plus years. And so when we talk about the way that we've always done it, right, I was disrupting a lot of norms, right, that weren't necessarily popular at the time. And so I felt myself feeling consistently overwhelmed. And so I started this exercise, and fast forward from 2013 to present day, I still choose a word. I choose a bee mindset. But that first year, I chose the word peace. And what I wanted to work on for that year was just finding peace. I wanted inner peace in the chaos. I decided to erase the word busy from my vocabulary, and I replaced it with the word full, because busy made me feel a negative response. And so I had to change that. And so I started to make small changes. I started to recognize that what I give my time and energy to grows. After the first year of the word peace, I wasn't done with it. So I spent a second year with the word peace until I really found peace in me, in what my goals are that weren't really popular with everyone, right? In how I communicated, in what some of my decisions were as a mom, in the fact that I worked a lot of hours as a mom, right? And so there was a space for me to kind of pull back in to think about my why and my focus. And so fast forward to this year, this word actually found me. So several years ago when I did work with Sean Aker's book in positive psychology, I learned about the Japanese art form of kintsugi. Has anyone here heard of kintsugi? It's where you fill broken pottery with a gold lacquer, right? To identify flaws and cracks, but you repair it with this gold lacquer. And so this word, right, I saw something about kintsugi back in October of last year. And then in November, I got a gift from someone that was white bowls with gold little swirls through the bowl, right? And in December, I started reflecting on what I wanted my word to be for the next year. And I realized, right, that I was focusing a lot of my energy in my workspace and at home in how we just embrace our humanness, in how we unapologetically and authentically show up as ourselves in all of our flaws, in all of our cracks, in all of our scars, in all of the things that we want to just do better, but in all the things that just make us us. And so I chose to spend this year being Kintsugi focused. That opportunity to lean into moments where I could be the gold lacquer to help people fill some of those cracks and scars, but I'm also celebrating mine, right? I'm recognizing the places I'm still working on myself, I'm still doing better, right? And slowly filling those lines, but also allowing people in my life to help me fill those lines too. And so that's welcome to space of vulnerability. And so I want everyone here to start to think about, each of you have these little pocket tokens, which are hexagons. And so the hexagon represents, right, the shape that makes up a beehive. And so on your hexagon, I want you to think about what bee mindset or mindsets you might want to write on this little hexagon to take with you for the rest of the year. What bee mindset do you want to focus on this year? What will help you grow and then reciprocally help you help others grow? Okay? So take a moment to think about what bee mindset you might want to put on your token, right, to take with you. Okay, the second core tenet is to find a growth partner. I showed in the opening, right, my co-author and I, right, working at the group level. A lot of people say to us, how did you co-author? Isn't it difficult, right, to write books together? And we've been doing it for over a decade. And so there's a space, we haven't been writing books, this was our first book, but we've been writing in the Scholarly Practitioner Journal articles, right, for over a decade. But there was a space for us to recognize, right, as growth partners, right, how do we help each other? And so his bee mindset for this year is to be altruistic. And so we've made a commitment to help each other, right? Living thousands of miles away, we're holding each other accountable to these bee mindsets that we're working on, right? We're accountability partners for one another. We find inspiration in the shared passion that we have for the work that we do together, right? In leadership development, but also in the writing space, right? But also we recognize that book number 1, The Beekeeper, focused on the individual level. We're finishing the pages of book number 2, which will be coming out from Wiley in March 2025, and that book is about the team level. That book is about how we're brighter, better, richer, stronger together. And so we've had a real opportunity as we're authoring this fable to think about the ways that we've grown as growth partners, but also the space that we've welcomed in vulnerability, right? In the things that are uncomfortable for us, in the things that we're not great at, but maybe that other person that we're working with and through is. But we have to allow ourselves, right, that space to welcome people in, to find shared interests, to encourage accountability in the things that we want to accomplish. Okay, and so here we are, right, as growth partners out on beehives, right, in our bee suits, learning from beekeepers about what creates a thriving hive. Bees make the world grow. If we're creating organizations where we're allowing our bees to go out and pollinate, to do the job that they were set out to do in meaningful ways, we can create a space, right, to encourage growth. Okay? And so there was a big learning for both of us, right, that we had this fear of bees. And so that completely changed as we learned about just the intricacies of bees. And so even to this day, when I go out to a beehive, right, I have no fear of going out and thousands of bees flying around me. But I also learned that bees smell your pheromones, right? They can smell fear, but so can people. And so in that space for us choosing who and how we want to be, we have to know how we're showing up. We have to know the energy that we're giving off to people, how we're inviting people in, how we're creating a safe space for people to come and do the jobs that they want to do to leave their mark on the world. Right? And so there's lots of transferable skills here. And so in this is actually a video that's not playing right now, which is okay, but this is 2 flowers, right, with 2 bees pollinating, right, at the proximal part of the flower, at the center. And so when we think about in the book, right, we learn in this fable the ways that we can learn from bees, right, to keep ourselves at the proximal part to pollinate, to keep ourselves at the proximal part of learning and growth, right, in our organizations to help the world around us grow, right? And they're doing that together. Okay, core tenet number 3, optimize the environment. And so you all have this hexagon, okay? At the organizational level, when we think about our environment, right, bees optimize every single inch of the hexagon space within their hive. They fill every single space with pollen and honey. And so bees are natural mathematicians. And so this is another learning for us is how do we take advantage of our environment to optimize every space that we have for learning and growth, right? If the environment's not working, let's not sit back and admire the problem, right? Let's create people that are solutions focused, who are helping being culture builders to help shape the environment with us. But we have to intentionally do that. I just worked with a leader who got survey results back at the end of last year, and he said, Katie, I have so much culture work to do. I need you to come in and work with my team, but this is my responsibility. And I said, wrong. It's everyone's responsibility. Every single person on your team is a culture builder. You just have to invite them to be part of that with you. Every single person is part of that environment, right? To make it better, to help people and things grow. Okay, I recently worked with a toxic leader. Completely toxic. Actually, this leader told me that my book wasn't going to count toward my promotion, right? Because it wasn't yet published and, right, a whole host of other things. I recognized that this person wasn't just doing this to me, right, but was doing it to people around me as well. And so we had an opportunity to join arms, right, and to make sure that we were investing in a positive environment, that we weren't allowing one person, right, to spread throughout a lot of people, but that we were coming together in the space to say, no, we actually can influence the way forward, right? We started doing team happy hours. We started getting everyone together to remind them of our mission and our focus and the things that we are doing, right? And it's amazing what happens when you invite people to rise with you, okay? All right, so the 4th tenet is learning and unlearning. Unlearning for adults is harder than learning. Unlearning is harder than learning because we're habitual creatures, right? And so sometimes we have to be able to hit the pause button to say, you know what? I have to stop doing that. Me doing that is not something I want to grow, and I have to stop giving my time and energy to that thing and replace it with something else. And so I have up here the golden rule. How many people have heard of the golden rule? I'm going to ask you right now to unlearn the golden rule. Unlearn the golden rule, right? I want everyone to unlearn the golden rule, which is to treat others as you want to be treated. And I want you to replace it with the platinum rule. The platinum rule says treat others as they want to be treated. When we're thinking about deep level diversity attributes and who and how we want to be, we have to know how we show up. But in the spirit of the golden rule, not everyone wants to be treated the same way I do. Not everyone is fueled the same way I am. Not everyone receives constructive feedback the same way I do. And so we have to be mindful that we're treating others as they want to be treated. But that means we're unlearning some of the things that maybe we've been told our whole life, and we're starting to choose a different lens to look at it from a different perspective. And when we're doing that, it means that we are enacting that be mindset to be proximal. We're keeping ourselves and others at the core of learning and growth, okay? And so, right, by show of hands, right, I want to know how many people in here, right, will choose to be a beekeeper. Right, we're raising our hand here too, okay? And so in this spirit, remember, and let me go back one slide, we author our story. We get to choose to hold the pen, to write our pages. And if we have a page that we don't like how we wrote it, we turn the page and we write another one, right? And we might have a couple of words or phrases that we don't like in that one. We turn the page and we write the next one, right? But that story's ours. And when I think about even my children, right, who are very different, I encourage them to write their story in really different ways, right? Because they get to choose who and how they want to be. And so I'll close with this. Okay, what is this word that's on the screen? Illness. So what happens when we replace I with we? The word becomes wellness. And so when we look at the logo of this day of Empower, what word is in a different color? We, right? We rise together. And so as you look around today, connect with people, unlearn from people, learn with people, right? Choose that be mindset of being curious to make connections, but also think about the ways in your environment at work that you're encouraging a sense of we, right? And that starts with who you choose to be, okay? And so if anyone is interested, we're actually celebrating our 1-year anniversary and hitting Wall Street Journal bestseller on May 8th. And so we're entering anyone who buys the book from Amazon, and you email us at hive@leadershipfables.com that you'll win a free keynote from my co-author and I. And so if you buy the book and you email us at hive@leadershipfables.com, we're going to do that drawing in the first week of May for that free keynote. And so I'll open it up now for questions. It's at the bookstore, yeah. Yes. Ask them. Sit down with your people and say, what moves you? What are your goals? Go through the values exercise with the people on your team. It starts to open up dialogue, but it pushes that space of self-awareness that allows us to open up that conversation, right, for them to get to know themselves, but then the opportunity for us to get to know them. Great question. Who else?
How do you deal with leaders that don't recognize this situation?
So the first thing is, she said, how do you deal with leaders that don't recognize this? In a lot of ways, and I remember in like an earlier part of my career, it would upset me. In many ways, they don't know. In many ways, there's learning opportunities, right? But the thing we can't train is motivation. If someone's not willing to learn, to change, to think about leadership in the perspective of helping others grow, there's nothing we could do about that. The only thing we could do is join arms with the people around us who do want to do that, and remember that we could lead from any seat. Leadership is not about position or power. It's not about title, right? It's about the opportunity, right, to influence. Okay, great question. Who else?
Earlier in your presentation, you mentioned about you don't do the children drama.
Yeah.
And you gave the example of your daughter and receiving that text. At what age were your children when you started teaching them how to handle those situations?
So this is really funny because my husband used to tell me I was crazy, and I think it came from being a professor and having college students that couldn't speak for themselves, that I was like, my heart sank. Like they would be like, okay, Mom, I'm here at Dr. D's office. What do you want me to say? What do you want me to do? And I was like, no! Like, I'm like, what do you want? Like, what do you care about? I know your mom. Your mom's awesome. But like, this is your life. And so from the time my kids could speak, I never order for them at a restaurant. They check themselves into the doctors. If they want to order food, they call and order it themselves. But their voice has been their voice since they could talk. And there's a space now. I have a middle schooler who's a really great communicator, but sometimes wants to close her door and not talk to anybody, right? And so there's mindfulness for me to give her space, right? We don't have to make people talk, but we have to acknowledge, do you want to just focus on what's negative or do you want to be part of the solution? You give them the choice, right? In drama, right, it's educating on what do you want the outcome of this to be? Because if you keep entertaining this, right, what are you hoping will happen? And so we start to just teach instead of telling. Yes, but you know what? So this is the piece, is like I'm still learning. I'm hit with moments all the time that I'm like, ooh, I don't like how I responded to that. Ooh, why was that my reaction? Let me get to the root. Now I could do better, right? And so we have to learn, right, the how we respond. Good, who else? Yeah.
How do you encourage a group mentality in a group that is very individualized on their own intent?
Yeah, so I do a lot of charter work with teams, and it starts at the individual level. So I usually do a DISC assessment, individual core values, right? Understanding the self. And then at the group level, I do what are your shared values as a team? Even, and I think about myself, right? Working as a faculty member, we're like independent contractors, right? But my school knows exactly what our mission is, student focused, right? And that our shared goal is to prepare each individual for a reflective life, fulfilling careers and transformative leadership in a world of change. And when we know that and we can articulate it, we could be doing a lot of different things, but we're guided by the same mission. But you have to spend the time to create the space that people know that, right? And you also have to create the space where you're optimizing the environment that's grounded in trust. And so I do a lot of work at the group level on the 4 C's of trust as well. And sometimes we recognize that those areas are not being focused on, which fails to allow people to be psychologically safe to come together to do that important work. Anyone else? I think I could probably take one more, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I think I may have seen on one of your earlier slides, did you have your top 5 Clifton strengths listed there as well?
I did. Let me go back. So I do this in my grad class that I teach, leading people in organizations. And so I also have my MBTI on here as well. So these are all the things, right, in my one slide. So across the bottom, she's asking about my top 5, right? Relator, individualization, strategic, ideation, and maximizer. I remember when I first took this, empathy was like my number 1. And then after I had kids, like empathy went off. I'm like, God, like I swear I'm still empathetic. But it's probably number 6. Like it's probably right there. But things just started to change, right, in where I was prioritizing energy. But why did you ask about Clifton strengths?
I think as leaders, we use it a lot in our organization, and what I've learned with working with my team is not only did I learn a lot about myself, but it really opened me up to understand them better and to be able to manage to those points. So I think there's a lot of value in, if you haven't had the opportunity to explore your Clifton strengths with your team, because it does definitely open doors and open your eyes to different ways to react and really help them grow.
Yeah, I want to echo this. There's a book called How to Fill Your Bucket that has the Clifton Strengths code in it. And so your team can take the assessment, but then the book is about how we become bucket fillers instead of bucket dippers. And so that comes back to that creating the environment where your team feels synced and aligned and encouraged. In DISC, there's something similar called a catalyst site that allows you to go onto this site and create group maps to see where everyone falls and what the group culture is, where people are more insular, where people communicate more directly, where people like collaboration, those that are more resolute, right? And so there's lots of tools and resources in assessments that help you get to that maximizing, bringing individuals together to optimize work together. Good. Okay, everyone, thank you. It's been a delight.